Alrighty, so we're prepping this tank for the next step. Let's get the glass on. Right here you can see me drawing right on the front of the glass face with a Sharpie marker. We're going to use that to line up the tape, and you can see me folding under those edges, which is going to make it easier to peel off later on. We'll get a close-up on that here right now. So grab the edge, fold it up, flip it under on itself, tape it back down, and then you have a nice easy edge to pull off that only half of it is stuck on there. Voila. Alrighty, so there's sections that need to be cut out here because right in the middle you can see that stain mark where we're going to be right there. So let's cut a little section out, and the fiberglass insert's going to be siliconing to that section, so we don't need tape there. But reaching in underneath that silicone is the next hard part. I'm adding in a little tab here to make it easier to peel that section off, because I'm going to have to reach down underneath and grab that tab to be able to get that tape off once the silicone's in place. Okay, so this section we're going to do a little bit of prep. I've got all of the masking tape in place, and you see right here we've got a secondary piece of tape that I can use to fish it up to this section here, and I can pull it off without having to reach all the way down underneath. Also, get a marker in place. I can use the marker to smooth the silicone out, one on each side, because I won't be able to reach in there and use my finger to spread the silicone on once I've already started going. I've got another piece of tape on that side, fishes down underneath to that piece of tape, and I think we're good to go at that point. Let's start siliconing. So I've got the edge cleared off, and just slow and steady wins the game here. Get a nice even coating all over everywhere, grab the glass, smash it in place, clamp it down, and then start spreading the silicone in. This is where that prep step comes in. You can see me reaching down in there, barely have any room to play on this thing, but I can still get all of that tape out of the way and smooth down all the edges. Using those markers to push it in, then finger wherever I can. Replace gloves often, get the bottom in place, extra ring there. We got the bottom plastic piece that goes in, and we're good to go. Alrighty, so moving on to the next phase, we'll let this cure for 48 hours, and we're going to do the pipes. I figured it was about time to get a little bit of help from my little minions. You having fun, Rainy?
Yeah. I'd love to be alone with you.
So here's my little helper, not very fast at what she does, but having a good time. I can definitely speed up the process doing it on my own, but the ultimate goal here is provide a fun learning environment for my kids. Anytime I can get them to help out, I will, and this is something that will last with them forever. They get to have fun, turn it into a game, give them turns back and forth, and then just let it all unfold. So we've finished cutting all the pieces into our starter points. We're going to move on to gluing it all together. Now this piece I'm assembling right here needed a little bit more forethought in the planning. I glued it all together and messed up horribly. See if you can spot it, I'll point it out later. And even though there is a big mistake right here, as it is, it works perfectly. There's no leaks, the water flows great, just a design flaw. And if you look at the union, you might see what's going on. Right here, I'm adding a little bit of extra silicone to the bottom to help that bulkhead maintain its seal once all that water weight's in there pushing down on this. Next, I'm setting up a piece of cardboard on the bottom, cutting it to shape to add extra padding between the glass and the stand to not just rely on that plastic bottom piece. So right there, I cut the hole, lined it up, cut all the edges down, fits into place. Press the piece down on top. Now if you take a look here, we have an indentation all around the edge of where the bulkhead is pressing against it, so I know how much extra I need to cut out for the circle. Now the primary use of this cardboard here is to add in extra padding between the glass and the stand. You could use something else like styrofoam, but I didn't have any on hand, so I just went with the cardboard, doubled it up, works just as good. Back on the pipes, and do you see it yet? But right here, I'm putting some marks on the bulkhead and the pipes so that I know exactly where it needs to be lined up. I'm going to disconnect the union, put some glue in there, put the pipe into place, and make it permanent. And I wish I would have seen this before I did that. So we're switching over to GIMP to do a little bit of a visual representation of what the sump looks like underneath of how it was put together. So I've got a few different portions here. We'll have the standard 10-gallon aquarium that you can purchase anywhere that aquariums are sold. Now there's acrylic inserts onto the glass, but there's not really much pressure that's going to be going onto this. It's going to be neutral pressure across the board because you aren't going to have varying water levels too much, so you're not actually holding any pressure in. A lot of people talking about sump design will talk about how you never want to touch acrylic to glass with silicone because you'll have problems with it disconnecting. That is true if you are going to try and hold water with it, but in this case the water is holding itself. So what we've got going on here is there's going to be one piece that goes down here. There's a cut into the top as a spillover, and then a cut down below another section that's walled off right here. And so the water comes down from the tank, drops in, and there's actually two sections over here. This little walled in, we'll do a top-down section to explain that here in a moment. But the water comes in, fills up a chamber on the side, spills over into this section, which has a spot for a filter sock that filters the water through the sock and then comes up and dumps over into the secondary section here, and this section is filled with media. The next portion is we've got from the top down another piece here that allows for the water level to be built up and held in, but then forces it down through the next section, which has a separator here to allow for the water to come up, called a bubble trap. And so in this section we have some light panel diffuser that is turned into a little box and sits across this section, which a big sponge sits on top of right here. Then in the final chamber there is a pump. Water's pumped back up into the tank and allows all that water flow to come through. So again, comes down, drops in, fills up, spills over, goes through the filter sock, dumps into the next section, filled with media, pushes through a sponge, drops over. The water level usually stays right about here when operational, and pump back up to the tank. So if we take a look at the top-down section of this tank, again you have your 10-gallon aquarium, and here is that piece that goes across, but we also have another little separator right here. This piece goes from the bottom up to this ledge right here, and there is a pipe that comes down through a bulkhead into it, goes down to just a few inches from the bottom of the tank. So the pipe, you'd have the bulkhead setting right at this section here, drops down to about right here. And in that section, there's a whole bunch of lava rock that's filled in around it, so the water has to go through the bottom and then forced up through the lava rock to add in a little bit of extra aeration, or not aeration, but to prevent the bubbles from coming up in there so much. So it boils down in, goes into this section where we've got a circular cutout for the filter sock, and then comes out into the secondary section. The rest of it's pretty self-explanatory, just 2 lines across. You got top down, bottom up. So we go on to the next section here, kind of explaining this portion here a little bit better. We have that wall that goes across is a big piece like this. So that takes up full top to bottom of the tank. So if you do fill up that back section, there is a channel cut in at the very top that allows spillover to occur if it gets too high. You then have that shelf, actually. Step that back a little bit. That shelf goes from this side over and down. And so you have this piece of acrylic here, front to back, and there is where the filter sock goes. But there is a cutout right here at this section. So water comes in right here, goes through the pipe that comes to the bottom, right through that section, bulkhead at the top. Water comes in, forced up through all the extra lava rock material around there, comes up and over, goes through the filter sock, then it spills out through this gap here, which is this portion right here, spills into the secondary area full of lava rock and ceramic media tiles, and this is where I throw in the charcoal and any type of other chemical filtration media that I use. Next portion pushes down through, comes up through the sponge, but this last baffle has a little bit more of a unique section to it. The wall itself is shaped kind of like this. Big old U shape. There's a couple little inserts on the side here, which are extra pieces of fiberglass, but it's 2 separate pieces that are sandwiched together that kind of come up, and so there is a little bit of a hole in between the pieces on either side here for a extra piece that I have cut out that's just a big square that can be inserted in that can cause the water level to come all the way up to the top when that square is put in, so that if I need to raise the water level I can, or I remove it and the water level comes even to this section right here. It's a little bit more confusing. We'll actually take a look inside the sump because it's a section that we can see while it's running. But overall, it's a pretty simple sump design. Water in, flows over a couple spots, and pumped back up to the container. I've got a Jibo DC controlled pump that's pretty nice. Enjoy it. But yeah, we'll take a look at the sump now. Okay, let's do another little demonstration section here in GIMP. I want to do a little kind of overlay of what the water flow is like within the system overall. We've got the main tank up above on the stand. We've got the stand down below, and we have the sump, which is nested all the way over on this side down below. The door, let's kind of switch colors here real fast. The door opens up right here in the middle, so I only have access to this half of the sump filtration system, but a lot of the filter media and everything is over on the other side for access in. To get around that, the sump, switch colors here again, has three sections of a lid on top. There is one section that goes from here to here, another section that goes from here to here, about, and then the last section, which is about here to here. These are just pieces of acrylic that go from side to side. So if we draw that in, you know, three-dimensional, you've got that part there. What the water flow does is, switch colors again here, is there is a large standpipe in the tank on this side over here. The water comes down through a bulkhead drilled into the bottom, and we hit a union joint right here so that we can separate that out, but I actually kind of messed up on that section. We'll talk about that later. We've got a 45 degree here to come down at a little bit of an angle, and then another 45 here so that we're not putting too much pressure on that section. Water comes in, drops down into the sump, and we know how the sump filtration works. Over to the pump, back up, and then there's a pipe that comes back up into the tank on this section, and we know there's the weird stuff where the waterfall comes in, fills up section A, goes over section B, flows back out, back down into the tank. So that is how the water flow works through the main tank section, down through the overflow, into the sump, pumped back up into the tank. Creation of the standpipe is the next portion here. This is a relatively simple design. Right now I'm just putting some tape over the threads because I'm going to cover this thing in silicone and cocoa bark. I don't want the threads to have any silicone in it, because if the silicone gets in there, then it's not going to get a watertight seal for where it connects through. Same as before, leave a loop in the tape so it's easy to peel off, and next part is sanding it down. So here we go, just get it roughed up with some 150 grit, 200 grit sandpaper, get some gloves on, get your silicone out, just put as much on there as you possibly can, make it as thick as possible, roll it in some cocoa bark, press it in, and you have yourself a standpipe that's disguised as a lump of wood. Here it goes, the initial water fill and leak test. Gonna fill this thing up and turn the pump on, just let a whole bunch of water cycle through for a few days. I kept this going for about 48 hours. It helped break off any loose cocoa bark. The water cleared up almost instantaneously. The filter sock down in the sump picked up all the debris and didn't have a single leak. Got it on the first go, which rarely ever happens. Take you on a top-down tour of this guy now. We've got the water flowing through. You can see the siphon effect going on there. We got a cap that's going to go on that a little bit later. Did something pretty creative with that. Flows up to the top, and that's that side. Back on this, you can see the lids on there. Water flowing through great. We replaced that pipe a little bit later with something better so that we actually have a siphon stop. But this section here is going to be the hard part. Filling that with substrate became a little bit difficult because reaching my hand back in there again is a tight squeeze and not too easy to do. But before we get to that, I wanted to deal with the in-tank substrate first. I started loading in handfuls of sand and just letting it blow around the tank and see where it would land. You can see here it's kind of piling up a big spot there, a little underwater waterfall, but there's bare spots in some locations, and at some places it sticks and some places it doesn't. but overall the sand's just going to drop where it drops, and the more you let it do so, the better it looks in the end. All those gaps you can fill in with larger pebbles and rocks later on once the sand settles, but just let it do its thing for now. Here comes my ingenious method for filling in that back chamber with extra lava rock. I chose lava rock for this section because the water still flows through there, through a whole bunch of holes drilled into the back as well as overflow through, and it doubles as extra filtration. But you can see the method that I'm using here is I just took some extra overflow pipe that I had for building the runoff system for the sump, and I cut off a plastic bottle, and I'm filling the bottle with rocks, and then sticking the mouth of that bottle down into the tube. I'm using a Powerade bottle there because the neck of the bottle is the same size as the tube. Give it a little shake, and those rocks fall right down the tube into the back section. Little by little, it filled up and worked out great. Alright, did you notice that section that I pointed out right there? The problem is, what I did was I have the piece coming down. Go a bit to black here. We've got the piece that comes down off of the bulkhead from the bottom of the tank. Hits a section of pipe and immediately goes into a 45. Halfway down that 45, I've got a little section, and then I put my union in, and then another section, and then another 45 to get the pipe to go over, and then it goes over to the 90, which drops down into the tank. So the fail point is right here. What I should have done was make a straight point into the union 45, 45, and then over, but because I made this 45-degree angle right here, then my union, when I need to move this tank in the near future here, I have no way of, I can disconnect the sump at this portion here, but I'll have to cut the pipe up here and completely redo the plumbing in this section to be able to pull the glass off the top and move this to a new location. So FYI, when you are working on tanks in the future, think about things like that, because that's going to add in a bunch of extra work for me in the long run, which could have been solved by just pre-planning those bins a little bit better, and that would have been able to go right back up to the hole, lay the tank on its side, transport easily. But now I either have to move the entire sump tank stand all assembled together, or cut the pipes and redo it, which is going to be the ultimate fix later on. But in cutting pipes, you have the potential for clogs, but we'll get to that when we get to it. Alrighty, I've been rambling on for about 20 minutes now about what's going on in this tank, so I think it's about time to leave you with some of my amazing GIMP art here, and I'll say bye, and I will catch you on the next one.